Good evening. At this time, please silence your cell phones. Be advised these proceedings are being recorded for those physically present in the council chamber who desire to address the city council, the planning commission. During the meeting, please complete the request to speak form and available at the front entrance of the council chamber and present it to the city clerk. Speakers physically present will be called upon at the appropriate time, and each person will be allowed 3 minutes of speaking. And I call this order convened at the joint special meetings. Welcome everybody who made it, and the City Council and the Planning Commission for Tuesday, January 27th, year 2026 at 4 p.m. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance given by Councilmember Wilson. Please stand.
Please join me in pledging allegiance to the greatest nation in the world. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Madam City Clerk, can we have roll call, please?
Vice Chair Sesenya.
Present.
Chairman Drew. Present. Councilmember Brown.
Here.
Councilmember Allen.
Here.
Councilmember Wilson.
I am here.
Mayor Pro Tem Sabino.
Here.
Mayor Hussey.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. So item A, public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to comment any item on the agenda only. At the special meeting workshop of the City Council Planning Commission, pursue the California law, the City Council Planning Commissioners will take on the public comment on the listed items. So do we have any public comment?
Yes, Cindy Bindi.
City Attorney?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, just for the record, we do have a quorum for the City Council. At this time, we only have 2 members of the Planning Commission, so we don't have a quorum for the Planning Commission. Not to say you can't proceed, but,
Well, here comes one.
Take
See,
that off the
we
record.
knew it. Thank you. Did you go, I mean, you must have I need a quorum, so,
perfect timing.
thank you.
You can withdraw
So,
that from the record.
Oh, we have a quorum now?
We now have a quorum.
Okay. All right. Scott, did you bring us anything to eat since we waited on you? Okay, City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
It'll be Cynthia Bidney.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
City Council, Planning Commission, good to see you all here. I'm here to express serious safety concerns related to the increasing transient activity in the J.C. Wallace area and how it is impacting our neighborhood and public spaces. Krager Park is located directly across the street from our junior high school, which makes safety especially critical. Recently, I reported an incident where a man was hiding in the rose bushes at the park. In addition to that, neighbors have observed what appear to be possible illegal transactions taking place in and around the park. Whether these are confirmed or not, the behavior is concerning and creates an environment that feels unsafe for families, students, and park visitors. Another issue affecting our neighborhood is that the individuals from J.C. Wallace area regularly cut through the open field to access our residential streets. This creates increased foot traffic through private neighborhood areas, and residents no longer feel secure letting children play outside and walking freely. Additionally, the fence near Stater Brothers has been cut. It's always open, which further increases access and raises concerns about trespassing, vandalism, and safety. When physical barriers are damaged, it sends a message that the area is not being monitored or maintained, which can invite more problems. At a previous meeting, the city mentioned that research was being conducted regarding the increase in transient activity and its impact on public safety. I respectfully request an update on that research. What has been identified so far and what steps are being planned to address these concerns? This is not about blaming or being insensitive to anyone's circumstances. It is about protecting our children, neighborhoods, and schools, and our community spaces. We need visible solutions such as increased patrols, improved lighting, repaired fencing, and coordinating outreach. Our residents deserve to feel safe in their own neighborhoods and public parks. I appreciate the city's time and attention and ask for transparency and timely action on these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. Get that written down for those concerns. Any other public comment?
No, sir.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment. We're going to new business. Item B, one joint council and planning commission site and ecological report view, workshop and housing element, presented by Daniel Worley, is that how you say it? Principal community planner with Michael Baker International. Okay, so who's going to give, oh, all right, go ahead.
Good evening, Council. Good evening, Planning Commission and residents. My name is Gabriel Arguez. I'm the Assistant Planner here at the City of Grand Terrace. And I just want to make a quick announcement and want everybody to know that we will be also holding a future study session next week on February 5th at 6:30 p.m., specifically for those who, affected property owners and for anybody who could not attend today. And so we scheduled it a little bit later in the evening so everybody can have the opportunity to listen, ask questions, and to be heard. Tonight, I'd like to introduce our consultant team from Michael Baker International, Dan Weary, and Hannah Creetman. They have extensive experience implementing housing elements across California, and they will be introducing this project and walking you through the facts this evening. With that, I'll turn it over to Hannah and Dan.
Thank you, Gabriel. So as Gabriel mentioned, we're the consultants working on rezoning to implement the recently adopted housing element. I'm Hannah Kreitman. I'm a housing specialist from Michael Baker International, and with me today is Dan Weary, the project manager. Cameron Savoy is also on our team and is leading the effort to revise and update the objective design standards, and will be presenting to you on this topic on a later date. The zoning and ODS are being developed in tandem, and there are many standards that may not appear in the zoning, but that may appear in the design standards and vice versa. So today we're going to give you an overview of the origin of the proposed zoning and what the city's obligation is, the goals of the rezoning, and the proposed standards. No actions will be taken on the zoning today, and we are here to provide an update and collect input on the proposed standards. Action will take place to adopt the rezones in April of 2026. Every 8 years, the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, issues a quantity of housing units by income level reflective of the housing need of a region to each Council of Governments, or COG. The COG then allocates a portion of this regional housing need allocation, or RHNA, to each jurisdiction in the COG region. The primary responsibility of Grand Terrace is that the city always maintains sufficient land and site capacity to meet the remaining RHNA for the entire 8-year planning period, which for the 6th cycle is from 2021 to 2029. This means that there must always be appropriate zoning and development standards in place for the RHNA to be built. Grand Terrace adopted its 6th cycle housing element on March 25th, 2025. The housing element identified sites for rezoning in order to meet the RHNA and prepare for the upcoming 7th cycle RHNA. This housing element was found in conditional compliance by HCD, conditional upon completion of the subsequent rezoning. All rezones outlined in the housing element need to be implemented in order to reach full compliance with state law. This year, SCAG also made available a REAP funding grant that must be used this year. The city was proactive in coordinating with SBCTA to utilize this opportunity to fund the rezoning efforts, update the objective design standards, and develop pre-approved ADU plans, all of which will be completed this year under the REAP grant. As previously noted, the 6th cycle housing element was adopted in March of last year. HUD sent a letter of conditional compliance in May of last year. The compliance is conditional upon adoption of the rezoning included in Program 1 of the housing element. Program 1 includes rezoning 97 acres at a residential density of 20 to 40 units per acre. HUD has issued several notice of violation letters and emails regarding the non-compliant housing element. On December 17th, the city and our team met with HUD to discuss the timeline to completion of the rezonings and compliance. HCD indicated that non-compliance by the end of April 2026 is likely to result in consequences. The compliance of the City of Grand Terrace's housing element was due on October 15th, 2021. Since the housing element was not found in compliance in 2021, the city is currently subject to builder's remedy until the housing element is found in substantial compliance. This means that proposed affordable housing projects where 20% of units are lower income or 100% of units are moderate income or emergency shelters are not subject to the city's zoning code or general plan land use designations. The city may be required to approve these affordable projects unless the project has a specific adverse effect on public health and safety, is in violation of state or federal law, is proposed on land zoned for agriculture or resource preservation, or does not have adequate water or sewage facilities to serve the project. And I believe Grand Terrace has received 2 builder's remedy applications so far. The city is also vulnerable to litigation, loss of local permitting authority, and loss of state or federal funding until the housing element is found in full compliance, which requires the rezoning to be complete. This is a map of the 97 acres of proposed rezoned sites. Every site noted will be rezoned to a density of 20 to 40 units per acre. There are approximately 8 new zoning districts that will be included in the rezone. I want to emphasize that neither the city nor the property owners are obligated to construct housing on these sites. Whether and to what extent housing is developed on each site is completely up to the property owner. Listing or mapping a property as a rezoned site to implement the housing element does not require the city or property owner to develop the property. The primary role of the housing element is to demonstrate capacity for housing development in the city. Rezoning a property to increase density does not require a property owner to develop, and all current uses may remain. If new development is to occur on one of the rezoned sites, that is when the new standards must be followed. The rezoning will increase the development potential of the included parcels and is intended to increase opportunities for property owners should they decide to develop. As required by the state of California, on sites rezoned to meet the RHNA, projects in which at least 20% of units are affordable are eligible for by right approval, which will streamline the development process for developers and property owners. Now that we have an overview of the obligations and background of the zone development, I'm going to pass it off to Dan to discuss the proposed standards of the new zone.
Great. Thanks, Hannah. We've only got a couple more slides here, so bear with us. So my role is just to give you a quick introduction into the proposed standards and contents of the proposed zoning. So there's really 2 major sections to every zoning code or zoning district, and that's the use regulations, what's permitted, either permitted principal uses and conditional uses, and then also the primary development standards. So we've got examples here for almost every zone, but particularly the multifamily zones. You've got your lot, minimum lot area and dimensions, your setbacks, your dwelling unit size, your height, your lot coverage, distance between buildings, and parking requirements. And key to this is also the density. So this table here shows the proposed new zoning district to implement the housing element. It's preliminarily named the R3-40. The 40 stands for the maximum dwelling units per acre, and this is all consistent and spelled out in the housing element. So this table shows these primary development standards and does a comparison with the existing R320 and the R324 zoning district. And so you can just kind of see how we're preliminarily looking to see how this new zone is going to be proposed and built out. So the top standard is the density, the top row. And you can see the R320 has a density range of 13 to 20 units per acre. The R324 has a density between 20 and 24 dwelling units per acre. And in the final column on the right, under the proposed R340, is proposed consistent with the general plan to be between 20 and 40 dwelling units per acre. So that is the primary difference between your existing zones and this proposed zone. Associated with that is if you have these higher densities, we need to change some of the other standards. So the next one really is height. With a higher density, generally need to go up a story or 2. So we're allowing room to do that. The other zoning districts, your highest density multifamily districts allow 35 feet. Right now, we're looking at, and this is all to be determined, somewhere between 50 and 55 feet. That would allow a good 5 stories. And we're working on that. We're doing some testing to see, what the appropriate standards are. So take these with a grain of salt. Similarly, the setbacks, front, side, and rear yard setbacks will change. And typically, when you get to the higher density, you usually have a little bit smaller setbacks. They're more urbanized areas, more intensively improved yards and setbacks. And when I say intensive, more formal, let's say, as opposed to just kind of a large front yard, which could be anything and everything in a typical single-family home. These tend to be, making the most of every area that they have. So we also have typically smaller setbacks. So we're looking for typically smaller front yard setbacks, smaller rear and side or interior side yard setbacks. And let's see what else is here. So that is really the primary issues about zoning. We can get into any questions you have. I did want to note that a companion project to this is the preparation of the objective design standards. And they're really kind of a continuation of the zoning. In some cases, some of those standards will become zoning. In some cases, zoning standards kind of get shifted into the design standards. They all become something that are reviewed for compliance when a project comes in. The zoning tends to be those big issues: density, height, setbacks, sometimes coverage. Sometimes you get into things with multifamily for like minimum open space requirements, your parking standards. The design standards tend to take that to a finer level of detail, where you're looking at the location and orientation of the buildings and the entrances, looking at the building massing, so how you might break up these larger buildings to be more compatible with their neighbors. So just letting you know that those are being prepared, and we mentioned our colleague Cameron Savoy, who's working on that right now, and we're going to have a whole separate workshop for that as well. We'll be back, and you'll see how these two kind of dovetail and work together. So they really are complementary. And then really next steps. So we're here to hear your concerns and issues and talk to you about those and provide you as much information as we can tonight. Ultimately, we're going to be preparing a formal submittal. So as we work through these issues, and we also coordinate with the objective design standards, we'll be back and presenting a formally proposed zoning package that'll come back to you for recommendation. To the Planning Commission, I should say there's both of you here, and then it'll go from Planning Commission, go to City Council for consideration for approval, and then we have to take this back to the state. HCD will be reviewing these for compliance as the commitments were made in the housing element. So they will be checking to see that the city's actually done what it said it would do back in the housing element, which was adopted in March. And then ultimately what we're looking for from HCD is a letter of substantial compliance, AKA certification. Yes, you've done what you said you would do. We agree with the way you did it. And then you're back in compliance and eligible for all your grant funding, state funding, and lack of any threats or from the state in terms of any enforcement actions. So with that, we're here to have a discussion with you and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Commission, have any questions? Council? I'm looking at you guys on the left first, Scott, because I could turn my neck to the left better than the right. So.
We can start with Scott if you have any questions, Scott.
Yeah. Just turn that on. Thank you for your presentation. That was enlightening as far as where we are in the process and where we're headed, and I appreciate that. I'm sure there will be many more questions as we go along. The first one that comes to mind, though, as I look at this map, how were these areas selected?
Yeah, that's going back. There's a whole lot of criteria that goes into it. So, and we have to not only satisfy the city, but we have to satisfy the state. So we have to kind of serve those two masters. Generally, the sites were selected based on a variety of criteria. It's land use and zoning, number one. Looking at the suitability of the properties. So are they likely and available to be developed within the next 8 years? That's the planning period or the cycle that we're required to plan for. And so typically we're looking for lands with a range of zoning, but really those higher density zones. And that's how we meet the RHNAs. Certain densities, anything over 20 to 30 dwelling units per acre can count toward meeting our lower income household requirements that the state assigns. So we need those higher densities, and that's also why we're doing the rezoning, is we needed more high density lands. And then we look at the land use. Are the lands vacant? Then great, they're generally available, but are they constrained with environmental constraints or easements or anything else that might limit or prevent their development? So we look at that. If they're, and like a lot of properties in Grand Terrace are developed, so we're looking at underdeveloped properties. So it might be a property that's 2 or 3 acres, but it's only got a house on it, or it's got a small commercial building, or it's got a small commercial building and a lot of parking lot that's underutilized. So are those sites that might be suitable for redevelopment with housing? So, and there's a lot of other criteria, but those are some of the main ones that we look at. And so we filtered through lots of different properties and work with your staff to identify where we think, the most suitable and available properties were. And then we have to prove it to the state. So the state doesn't just take our word for it. They're like, okay, show us trends, show that these are other properties like these in the area are being developed. And so we have to kind of document a lot of that. And that was a lot of the work that we did in your housing element. I know it's a long-winded answer. Hopefully that was getting to your point.
On the same vein, I was wondering why we didn't include the gateway area as part of this.
I think she
Can
was
you
asking.
repeat that? We couldn't hear.
Gateway's already entitled, we don't get to count that.
Okay, so it's
And it won't-
already part
And it
of,
won't be low income, high density, it'll be single family.
Okay.
So we're, and as, I'm sorry,
Okay.
what he said before is we're looking things that have underutilized and a potential to be flipped at some point in the future. This is Gateway's brand new stock. We have, 90 to 100 years lifespan on those buildings.
Okay.
In some of these areas, we have buildings that are pushing the 70, 80, 90-year lifespan already, so it's stock that needs to be rolled.
all right, that answers my question, thank you.
Okay, Tara, can you repeat your question too? Because I heard the answer. I feel like I'm on Jeopardy, I didn't hear it.
I was wondering why we didn't zone or overzone or whatever the gateway area that we're planning to use later.
Okay.
And it seemed like a good candidate for this, in my opinion.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Well, I know it's hard to hear around some of these places. Ed?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I heard Hannah right, she said it's not a requirement that the property owners do this with their property unless they chose to do so.
Correct, yeah.
And
We just
then
have to
second-
make sure the zoning is available.
Yeah. Secondly, I guess this question is to you, Mr. City Attorney. My lot is one of the ones that are going to be going to this zoning, so most likely when this comes to the Planning Commission, I'll have to exonerate myself. Do I exonerate myself today as well, since I know there's no decisions being made, but am I allowed to talk about this before I move forward?
Well, that's a good question. So what I would suggest is if you want to talk about your specific property, then.
No, not my specific property, no. Just
So-
this in general is being affected, so I know when it comes for a decision,
Right.
no decision today, I'll have to probably go sit in that wonderful, comfortable room again.
Yes, I mean, we can explore how to basically carve out that portion of the discussion and maybe have you sit out that portion and then participate in other portions. We have to look at that because it's a
right.
little bit nuanced.
I don't want to talk about any specific property today, just about the
Yeah,
plan that is being brought forward.
Yeah, I think that's fair today.
Okay, thank you. So with that being said, hello, Dan.
Nice to see you.
So with these, again, I understand that this is not necessarily going to happen in our community, that people are going to convert their property to these things. But if we start going to 50 to 55 feet tall, I can see a lot of issues coming up, number one, for our fire department. We don't have any equipment to be able to work with 55-foot tall buildings. So is that come upon the city to have to now contract to get the equipment, buy the equipment for the fire department and so forth? The other issue is, how's the city work with, we use a lot of outside resources such as Colton for sewer and for, I don't know, does Colton take care of our drainage or does everything go to the wash here?
Drainage is ours, sewer is Colton.
Drainage and sewer is Colton. So those are gonna create, I mean, we got all these new rooftops that are gonna be moving more water into the gutter system, which changes the, now, do we have to deal with the coastal departments with more stuff going into the waters that lead to the ocean? I mean, who is responsible for that when we have to make changes, such big changes to a community
Yeah.
to resolve this? Is it the developers that pay for the change? Is it, how are we going to be able to absorb that?
Yeah, those are multiple questions, good questions. I'll try to take them maybe in reverse order and remind me if I forget one. But in terms of the utilities and the design, there's other standards that will require. So all new development greater than, I think it's 5,000 square feet, needs, like stormwater runoff, needs to be treated. And there's a variety of different ways to do that. You're right, as you have more development and more rooftops, that's more runoff, more parking areas is more runoff. That's all going to have to be treated regardless of whether it's new high-density multifamily or commercial development. Those are just the standards that apply kind of across the board. The multifamily developments will have slightly different design constraints, how they figure that out, where they put that stormwater detention and treatment on site. And this is an issue for every development project. Do we do it the inexpensive way? If you've got land, you build a depression and that's where you hold the stormwater flows and then you let those seep out slowly and you treat that water so when it leaves, it's generally cleaner than when it came on. If you don't have the room for that, then you can put it underground. You can put it in kind of mechanical systems as opposed to just using surface soils. Those are more expensive, but you can put those in parking lots and build over them. So that's a designer issue, and you won't have to deal too much with that. Our objective design standards won't have to deal too much with that. In terms of other services, we are just kind of looking at a macro level, how is this going to affect the city's fiscal health, and exactly those issues. What about services to support this projected growth? And that's being studied now, so we're going to come back with some answers on that. In terms of the height is a good point, so we'll look at that. As I said, these were preliminary. These are kind of typical numbers that we see with other zones with similar densities, but we've got some flexibility. So that's what we want to hear from you is, what some of these issues and limitations are, and we can try to adjust. Generally, if we go up a little bit more, we can get that extra story. That gives more flexibility on the ground to put in amenities and more open space and gives you more flexibility that way. So it's kind of squeezing the balloon. You can kind of go up and have more flexibility on the ground level for setbacks and buffers and amenities. If you squish it down and you still have to meet that density, then you generally have a larger building footprint and a little bit less room for some of those other things that you might want. So we try to find that balance. Sorry.
So to add to what Dan said is the stormwater current state and federal requirements require that we cannot shed additional water from what's currently being shed. So whatever lands on that property now has to be contained infiltration, evaporation on that property, and that's part of the design of that. That's what he said, was talking about detention basins, underground storage. The same thing with utilities. So if somebody built 10,000 units in one corner of the city, they would have to then upsize the sewer lines, the water lines, the power lines through the remainder of the city to get their facilities fed or to get their sewer out. So you can't just build it and then expect us to increase the remainder of the system. The developer is responsible for mitigating their full impact on the system throughout. So if you're going to add If it's 6-inch sewer line, you need to be at a 10-inch, they'll need to build a 10-inch from their property to the next point where it's able to handle that flow.
Okay, thank you. Well, just like on our last planning commission meeting we had to look at some things, and the commission made a request to get some additional training and involve the fire department and Edison and so on and so forth, another group training with the city council and the planning commission. And one of the big concerns was, you know, we're being told to build more and get away with some clear areas and so on and so forth. And I mean, Palisades just ran through my mind at 100 miles an hour. Now I realize the fire department was at a disadvantage with water, and I'm not trying to turn this into a political thing, but if we start building more homes and building higher ones, A, fire trucks aren't going to be able to help us with a 55-foot tall building. Two, do we have enough water in Grand Terrace for the new construction of these homes? Is it your organization that looks at these issues, so when you come to the planning commission, it's addressed that here's what the fire department's making recommendations, here's what the Edison is making to ensure that we have the power source, and the gas company for the gas, the water, Riverside Highland Water Company. Is it you, or is it on the staff to go out and figure this out for this process?
Most of that was addressed at an admittedly higher level, but at kind of a macro level with the housing element. So that was looked at. Are there adequate facilities and utilities there? It doesn't get into the detailed level like Conrad mentioned, which is, you know, when a project is proposed, what do they need specifically to make their water sewer connections, but on a macro level, yeah, there appears to be there's adequate capacity.
So if they require more water, they will have to figure out some way to meet that water demand. If they require more sewer, they have to, as part of the design of that project, they need to mitigate their impacts. And that is more water, more sewer, more power, wider streets, new intersections. All of these things are tied to the project and are conditioned. As you're aware, we bring projects forward all the time with multiple conditions, and those are the conditions of the project to mitigate those impacts across the broader scale of the city.
All right, well, in regards to traffic, not to say that's my background. Okay, it is. Just this section that's west of the 215 freeway. There's Grand Terrace Road, Vivienda Road, Carr Road maybe. There's no way it can handle all that traffic, those cars to go in that, to develop that area with that many homes in that area. Where's that, is that as well, would it lie with the developer for infrastructure for the roads?
The developer would have to mitigate their impacts.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for that presentation, both of you. So I have 4 questions right now. So I read through the report, and if I understand it right now, we had, the city needed to rezone 670-something parcels. Is that correct? Approximately.
We're about 190, 195 parcels.
It's 90-something acres.
97 acres, yes.
97 acres, but I'm talking about parcels.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's not important the number, but it has to do with my question is, did the city, and are we just meeting the requirement from HCD for the RENA number, or are we going over with a surplus?
Yeah, you have a surplus, and the decision was made. You're almost closer to the 7th cycle, the next housing element cycle from the last one. Kind of got a late start on this, and so the decision was made. Let's plan for the next one. Set yourselves up for the next one, and there's some real advantages to doing that. So you have in your housing program, you have zoned for more than the absolute minimum. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the state wants you to have a buffer. So as Hannah mentioned, you always have to maintain a certain minimum. You have to cover that RENA and have that capacity at all times. If you don't, And for instance, if you lose some of that capacity, which happens with development, properties fall out or they get developed with less than what we had planned for, you have to make that up. If you have a buffer, then you don't have to immediately rezone lands, because rezoning is difficult and takes time. So you've got a good buffer that meets the 20%, which is kind of a good standard. And then you have more properties that were rezoned really to kind of set yourselves up for the 7th cycle. And there's some real advantages to doing that is, one is the 7 cycles coming up soon, even though we just finished the 6th cycle. So while you're at it, you're kind of planning more comprehensively and looking forward. The other advantage is that you will be in a good position for the 7th cycle. If for some reason we didn't do this and you fell out of compliance, suddenly what happens, your RENA that we have now was 670 something. 630 units. And who knows what it'll be in the 7th cycle. It'll probably be that number larger. They can become added together. What we do now will actually carry over. So if you stay in compliance, like you are or will be, the capacity you create now will carry over and be available for the 7th cycle. So you're looking ahead. You're going to be in good position, as opposed to doing the minimum now and then turning right around and having to do more in another year or two.
Do you know yet the 7th cycle numbers?
We don't know that yet. Yeah, it's big guess.
Yeah, so, there was recently an audit of HCD that was completed, and for what it was worth. But it was interesting, some of the information that came out in that, in that audit. One of the things that a lot of elected officials I've heard voice at like league and summits and things like that is that the California population is not, the trajectory is not there like it used to be. But yet HCD is continuing to, with that trajectory with the numbers are they taking that drop in population, that flat rate, would that come into play?
It may. The state's going to set the overall number, and then those numbers get distributed to each of the regions, and the regions disseminate that down to each of the individual cities and counties. But they do some projections. Whether they're over-projecting, it's a good question. For example, just the projections that were required for this cycle is 632 is, and that's supposed to be built over the 8-year period, and we're, 6 years into it? 5. So we're supposed to have another 632 units within the next couple of years. That's not what's actually getting built here. You're looking at a handful of new units in Grand Terrace every year. So there is a gap between what the state's saying you have to plan for and what the market is bearing.
Population growth is a factor they use to determine that RENA number. So they're looking at land availability, population growth in each jurisdiction. They're looking at availability of resources. So it's something like a rate they're looking at and considering when they're starting to prepare your RENA for the 7th cycle. And your 7th cycle housing element is due in 2029, so those numbers are likely to come out next year.
Okay. And this is my last one. So if a property owner whose property has been included in this rezoning effort redevelops that property but does not increase the density, in other words, let's say, for example, the house burns and they replace the house with what was there. Does the city need to replace that parcel?
It could be, yeah. If for some reason that property isn't able to meet what was planned for, then yeah, you use your buffer first, and then if you fall below that buffer, or that RENA, at any time, then you have to replace it. So you can find additional sites. Might be the neighboring site that wasn't included, but maybe it's similar and suitable. Or if you really have to, you might have to rezone some other lands to create the capacity.
So there's two ways sorry, I'm gonna steal this one. There's a couple ways that the city might fall into that net loss that you're talking about. One of them is if a site is included in the housing element and is projected to be 30 units per acre, 30 units on a 1 acre lot, let's say, and a property owner decides to develop that lot with 20 units, the city would need to find a site somewhere else that makes up that difference in 10 units. But also, if the housing element projected 30 lower income units are going to be built on that site, and the property owner builds 30 market rate units, the city would need to find another site for 30 lower income units, because it's an income specific projection as well, which is one of the benefits of rezoning slightly beyond and including that buffer is if the city does fall into that net loss and properties are developed with less than what is projected in the housing element, you only have 6 months to find an alternative site. And in Grand Terrace's case, that would likely require rezoning just because the availability of zoning for housing at that density already in the city. So including the buffer and the little bit of excess of rezoning and excess density does prevent you from having to continually be chasing and continuing to rezone new parcels for the next few years until the next cycle.
Okay, right on. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Wilson?
I want to go back to a couple of things, but one of my first questions is, do any of these proposed R340 sites actually pencil? In other words, in your discussions, has there been any discussions with the property owners that actually have meat in the game? Because what we've run into in the past, even though we've encouraged affordable housing according to the state requirements, whether it was in the first cycle or the 15th cycle or whatever it is that the state's doing, the bottom line is they can't get them to pencil. And not only can they not get them to pencil eventually, but they can't get them to pencil enough to be able to even apply for any kind of money if it was even funded. I mean, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, and it's sad that we have to, buckle over to the state for these requirements, but, it's here and we're in the process. It's just that it seems to me that property owner discussions would be really valuable in these circumstances, because we can't keep kicking the can down the road. One guy has one that's, scaled for 40 units to the acre. Instead, he builds 15 the acre. It's the only thing the market will really support. And then now it's up to the city to try to find another little capsule that we can upzone to the max and hope that it's going to be there. What is this? This is like mandated third world blight. Down the line, there's going to be a point where there are no more available parcels, and you're going to end up with a bunch of sites that can't be developed because they were the only ones that could be developed at 60 units to the acre. I mean, because the requirements seem to change every time somebody bends down and ties their shoe. The other question I had was, and this is a separate question, and maybe I've already answered my own questions, but this 7th cycle, I know there is a move afoot in the legislature to try to curb all of this stupidity when the state makes a set of requirements and then moves the goalposts. And so we barely get to a point where we spend a ton of money, which we don't have, trying to make the requirements, and the next thing we know, all of a sudden the goalposts have been moved, and so then we have to rebuild 3/4 of whatever we've done in research and studies and so on. This 7th cycle, is this going to demand the same kind of hijinks where we have to spend another $250,000 trying to find the target, even though we don't even know what it is right now? I mean, those two questions are kind of burned in my brain as we look at this. I've been involved in planning now for probably 30 or 40 years, like when it started. And it is amazing to me that we can't find the actual rules. So it's very difficult to adhere to the rules. And even if we get the rules figured out and we zone this stuff, how many developers are actually going to go in there and make it work? I mean, it's a pipe dream. Well, what I see is this is a pipe dream, a political football. And first of all, it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the state. You can talk to tons of developers and they'll tell you all day long that it doesn't work. But on top of that, I mean, maybe for 30 units at a time, what are we going to have happen to us at the end when they've changed the rules so many times that we're talking about, 20-story, 60 units the acre or better? So I'd like some feedback.
Developer and property owner interests were things that we took into consideration when doing site selection, and that's also one of the intents of this meeting and also the study session we're hosting on February 5th. We're specifically reaching out to the property.
I can't hear a thing you're saying.
Sorry.
Thanks.
We're specifically reaching out to the property owners of the sites included in the rezone and inviting them all to the study session on February 5th, because the intent is to tailor the development standards to something that property owners would be interested in developing on their property. We also, as I mentioned, part of including a parcel as part of the rezoning to implement the housing element is if the property is at least 20% lower income, the development is approved by right. So there are streamlined approval processes for development, so that will hopefully encourage some development on these properties as well. And then as far as your second question, there are benefits to having enough site capacity in your housing element to not need to rezone to meet your RHNA. So by setting up yourself with this rezoning now in the 6th cycle, and as we talked about, you're preparing for the 7th cycle, that's going to help ease some of that burden as we're working on the 7th cycle, because your zoning will already be set up to meet the expected unit capacity.
Is there going to be an 8th cycle and a 9th and a 10th and 11th? Is it just going to go on forever?
Yeah, the housing element is on an 8-year cycle, so as far as we know and as far as state law says, it's going to go on forever.
Perpetual silliness. That's terrific. Very good. Wow. This is ludicrous. Thank you.
Councilmember Brown.
Well, I share Councilmember Wilson's frustration. Quite honestly, I think this entire charade is a waste of taxpayer time and money. The circumstances that led to the numbers that we're talking about today have developed over 12 years. This was supposed to be completed in 2021, and now we're sitting here at the 11th hour with our hand being forced. None of these properties are going to be developed. It doesn't pencil. And that was Councilmember Wilson's main point, is this is totally unrealistic and it's going to continue to accumulate in the future. One of the things that in your presentation that stood out to me, though, was that the property owner's interest was considered in selecting these parcels. And as I'm sitting here looking at this map, there's a cluster of parcels that is pyramid shaped off of Canal Street. And I don't know what you guys were thinking. I can see a lot of older home stock and some vacant parcels in other areas of town, but those are single family lots that are probably 12,000 square feet. A developer would have to acquire dozens of parcels to make a project work in that area. And it's my understanding, even at 40 dwelling units per acre, we're talking a minimum of 3 acres to have a market rate development pencil. And that's what we're talking about in Grand Terrace. We're not talking about publicly subsidized housing here. those projects are going to the larger cities, our neighboring cities, San Bernardino, cities that have something to offer. Those cities are providing dirt, so if they can provide land, then the developers are getting tax credits and they're going in and building housing that has some set aside for low mod income. That's not something we're going to see here in Grand Terrace. I think that every resident should understand that anything that's being built here is market rate. We're not doing low income housing. We're not going to qualify for any tax credits that I've seen. It's super competitive. It's ultra competitive across the entire state, as you know. And again, those tax credits are being awarded to municipalities and some counties that have some resources. They have skin in the game because they've got money or they've got dirt. We have neither. And so anyway, here we are today. You know, we'll end up moving forward with this at some point in time because the state has a gun to our head from a planning standpoint. But realistically, it doesn't change anything for the existing property owners, and they're not being forced to develop their properties. We're not telling them they have to develop their properties, and we're going to continue playing this game and wasting time and money, and I'm extremely frustrated by it. I think it's very deceptive on the part of the state, and it's shameful. Quite frankly, if you look at this document that you presented here, and we just remove all these layers of bureaucracy and let the market dictate where development occurred, we would solve the housing problem in California, because you remove all the regulations that are holding the incentive back to invest and develop, and that's the big issue statewide, and things like this only contribute to the problem. So I don't have any comments for you, or questions for you, I should say. I'm just frustrated by the situation, and I think it's unfortunate that this is going to be very confusing for a lot of people, as you know from working in other cities, and it's really a waste of time. So thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Truly, and I couldn't agree more with my colleagues here on the dais. I mean, even Chairman from the commission and his statement, I mean, I don't believe that it's politicizing this issue at all, when at the end of the day, state legislation continues to marginalize every single hard-working taxpayer in the state of California, including great communities like ours in Grand Terrace. You know, we're saying, well, none of the property owners here, which everything pretty much other than maybe 3 locations are all on my side of town. And so, you know, it is heavily leaning on the west. And we're looking at property owners saying, well, they're not going to have to redevelop, they're not going to have to appease the rezoning, but also that the city is at the mercy of having to make it up and find it somewhere. Which, I mean, we've seen other great areas, beautiful cities like Yucaipa, who are now subjected to the old stack and build. And everybody trying to figure out exactly what's going to happen in them, watching their communities change over and over. And time again, this dais hears from our community and the residents that, you know, we need to preserve our city, and the people up here do not care. We just have to rubber stamp it. And just as my colleagues have said, we have no choice, because at the end of the day, Sacramento dictates how we govern and what decisions we make. And so thank you for doing your best of what you could find and trying to make, you know, lemonade out of the lemons you've been provided here. But we too will also continue to be vocal and concerned, and, you know, raise our voices about what this does to the city that we're trying to preserve, while also not losing it to Sacramento. So thank you.
Well, do you guys feel like a punching bag? Sometimes. I know we're here before, and you know, I thank our planning commission and our council for their subjects, and I understand how frustrating it is. I mean, I go to SCAG, bless you, I go, Southern California Associate Government, and the same thing. And they present housing elements and they take it to the state, and the state's like, well, I don't know what to do. I mean, they don't know what to do, basically. So we bring in experts like you guys, and everything's changing. So a couple questions, because the RHNA process was aimed to increase housing supply and affordability, promote infill development, protect environmental and agricultural resources, reduce greenhouse gases, improve job-to-house relationships, balance income distribution, and also for a future fair housing. So that all sounds good, but it doesn't, for a developer standpoint, it's not good. So here we are, and we know we spent money. You guys aren't doing it pro bono, are you, for us? I mean, I try to get the lawyers to do pro bono, but it costs money. It's money that the city can use for something else because, like our colleague said, the state mandates us to do this. And then we have, because we were here last time and people were up in arms. They thought we were going to go kick down their house and pull them out. And no, we had to explain it to them. So we're doing, a wish fantasy kind of thing like this can happen. And, the Planning Commission, we also, it's not just the house, it's the infrastructure that's got to be thought about. It's, the roads, everything. There's a big deal on this. It's not just putting up a house like back in the old days. Now, we know being on these committees, it seems like we're in two different states, the northern and the southern, because it seems like the northern's always dictating how we're going to do down here. And their housing elements are a heck of a lot different. They're looking at high density, 55 feet's like a small house for them up there. So is there any difference between the RHNA numbers for the northern that they have to do in the big metropolitan compared to us? So, and I know when I go to these meetings, everybody asks our RHNA numbers, which I don't know how you guys came up with their formula, but I tell them, and they're all happy. They're like, what? Well, they're jealous because they got 18,000 developments they got to do. So who came up with the overall RHNA numbers? What formula did they have? And what is the difference between Northern California and Southern California in our housing development?
The RHNA numbers start with the state overall, and then they're given to each of the council of governments, the COG, so in your case that's SCAG, and then it's passed down to each of the jurisdictions. And it takes into account things like land availability, population growth, availability of resources, and it is scaled based on the size of the city. So you're looking at the larger metropolitan cities like Los Angeles have hundreds of thousands of RHNA units, and then we're also looking at teeny tiny rural jurisdictions that have a RHNA of 2. So the 630 units for the 6th cycle was determined based on the current standings of Grand Terrace and of San Bernardino County as a whole. It varies cycle to cycle based on what they're seeing as far as trends as population growth, development. So like in your 5th cycle, your RHNA was 118. So that can help kind of project what you're expecting to see in the 7th cycle, is they're utilizing what they're seeing as far as trends as development, population growth, and existing resources in the city to determine what that overall RHNA number is. But it does modulate depending on what is available in your city and what the population is in your city.
So what do you do for a city that's completely built out? No, there's no land, and they force a RHNA number on it. You have to go with the old construction and say, hey, this can get tore down one day?
Yeah, so that's actually one of the things we take into consideration when we select sites for rezoning. Grand Terrace is a pretty significantly built-out city. So when we are looking at sites for the RHNA, especially for rezoning and increasing capacity, we're looking at recent development trends in the city and in the surrounding areas. So for Grand Terrace, we also looked at development trends in Colton and Upland and a lot of the surrounding cities in San Bernardino County. One of the things we look at is age of the developments. So that's something like if we're noticing that every parcel that was previously non-vacant that got redeveloped into housing in this community or in surrounding communities was over 40 years old, we're not necessarily going to pick a parcel in Grand Terrace that has a building that's only 15, 20 years old because that is less likely to develop, and we're going to be looking for parcels that have buildings that are also over 40 years old. We're also looking at existing uses that might not be utilized to the degree that they previously were, so that's something like strip malls, parking lots that are underutilized. And we also look at parcels that the existing use on the parcel could be maintained with additional housing developed. So that's something like if you have a pharmacy that there's room for housing to be built on top of, if you have a parking lot that could be half maintained, or residential development built and public parking could be looped into that development. So that's some of the strategies that we look at when we're looking at a city that is pretty developed, is how we can utilize the rezone areas to take advantage of what's already there, and also how can we look at regional trends to determine which areas are more likely to redevelop into housing.
All right, well, my last question, besides, I like to see housing, people move in here, but not stacked on each other. That's why people, they move out east to have, from LA County here, they have a bigger plot and stuff. But what is the overall benefit for the city of Grand Terrace to have this development, this RENA thing? What do we get out of this? I mean, we're paying money into it, so what are we getting for when we pay this money to? What kind of thing do we get back for our investment? What do we get back from our investment, from the state or anything?
Having a compliant housing element makes you eligible for state and federal grants, which you might not be if your housing element is non-compliant. We also mentioned earlier in the presentation that without the compliance, you are subject to potential fines from the state, which they indicated are more likely to happen in the next year if the housing element isn't found compliant this year. There's also, there could be potential loss of local control, and that also goes along with the builder's remedy and development that's able to happen beyond the city's current zoning code and general plan.
So that was, I think, 1 carrot and 3 sticks. But the goal is, as you mentioned earlier, the purpose of doing this is to provide a variety of opportunities for housing needs and trying to meet your housing needs. So that's the potential benefit, is that the zoning will be there when and if the market ever comes around, so that you can build housing that meets a variety of housing needs, and that's good for your local economy. People can live and stay in your community as they age through, the life cycles, so you can kind of grow and build your communities. That's the larger kind of macro, benefit and scheme. But a lot of this is, as we mentioned earlier, there's a gap between perhaps what the state sees as necessary and what the market's going to deliver. One of the things we talked about was, the numbers that the state set. It was, I think, 3.4 million for this cycle, and that got distributed. And so Grand Terrace's share was 673 out of 3.4 million statewide. And again, that's kind of trying to be proportionate based on some, formulas and algorithms. But if you looked at the overall production over the last, I think it was 20 or 30 years, including some heydays when we were actually building housing, as opposed to the periods where we haven't really been building at all. Even in those periods, the rate of construction per year is less than what the state is projecting and telling us that we have to do. I think at the highest point, we built something like 110,000 units statewide per year. And the current projection is you need to build 130. So it's not likely to happen, right? We don't have the materials, the supply, the machine to build that many units. So there is a gap there. Don't blame the messenger. We're just here to try to help you meet it.
Well, no, I'm not blaming the messenger, but more of the far as getting a grant, maybe it's more of like they said, a gun to your head. If you don't do it, we're going to fine you.
That's the
and
other.
so we're
there's more sticks
paying
than there are
money that we can use for our city. And I know you're the messenger to avoid a fine on something that's getting thrown down our throat.
There are some benefits to pursuing the rezoning through the housing element process, which, as Dan mentioned, the overall goal is to provide opportunity for people to continue to age within your community, have access to resources within the community, different levels of housing. But one of the benefits that the state does provide is with the recently passed Senate Bill 131, which means that if you're implementing rezoning, if you're pursuing rezoning in order to implement the housing element, that rezoning is CEQA exempt. So you don't need to do an EIR for this rezoning. So that is one of the benefits that the state recently passed just a few months ago, where if there was a missing housing need within your city and then you wanted to create an opportunity for rezoning, this is saving a lot of time and money by pursuing it through the housing element process.
Okay.
And SCAG did provide, just one of the other nice benefits is this project is eligible for the SCAG grant fund, so you met a number of their criteria, and a lot of which you mentioned, infill and housing growth and smart growth, et cetera, and affirmatively furthering fair housing. So this project meets all that. This is being paid for by a SCAG grant, so that's, at least you're not paying out of pocket for this, which is really nice.
And that's really thanks to your city staff. They were really proactive in reaching out and asking if this grant could be used for this project.
Yeah, I know it's a big subject, and, we've been multiple meetings for that, but Mayor Pro Tem, you have a last question here, or a question, comment?
Yes. So a couple of things were mentioned that, a couple of things were mentioned that, if we get the certification, then we don't have, we no longer have to go through CEQA, for these developments. But does that stop the lawsuits from the environmentalists?
I want to clarify, the developments themselves will still have to do CEQA. The rezoning is exempt from CEQA.
Okay.
So you're not having to do an EIR right now.
Okay. And my next statement, I've been up to Sacramento to advocate with my colleagues and staff to discuss the needs of Grand Terrace, because we are pretty much already a developed community. And, the threat is that, well, if you don't fall in compliance, then you're no longer eligible for state grants and state funding. Within those grants, I can tell you that among the 7 to 10 legislators that we met with to discuss, people who were chairs of committees and appropriations and in those areas, every single time we sat with them, do you want to know what they said? You are too small to get a grant. You are too small, do not have enough impact. It will do nothing for, my area. You're so insignificant that, we'll be lucky if we can give you any money. Go find another city that might have the same needs to give you money. And so even just using that statement over and over as a carrot over our head is, it's invaluable, that statement, because we're already too small. The legislators don't find any value in Grand Terrace. Our congressional has also stated, that, well, we can't help you, we need to go where we have a bigger audience. And so that is the actuality of what we are up against. So if we're not in compliance and we don't get any money, that's fine, because we ain't getting it anyways.
Also, we're told there's no money in the state budget anyway, so. Councilman Allen, you had a closing statement? We'll go back on a closing thing.
Okay. So, as I look at this, I remember that Councilmember Wilson and I had a discussion quite some time back, some months back, over this whole thing. And I remember that, Doug, that it was kind of annoying. You were annoyed, and I was too, and I think everybody involved was, that in previous cycles, the properties that were, or the parcels, or that were being rezoned were sprinkled around the city. And there was, like you said, it never presented an opportunity for anything worth a developer's attention. Whereas this time, staff and the MBI has taken and made areas that are a developer could look at, and then take a larger area and pencil them. And I think that what maybe 20 years, 30 years in the future, the west side of the city is going to be really, really special, because the whole west side is ripe for development, and because we're rezoning these large areas that a developer can come in and make something out of, a planned community in the distant future, we've, I think it's better than just trying to, like we did in the past, sprinkle around. I don't even know how we would do that back then. I have one last question, though, and it just popped in my head. Does rezoning property trigger a property tax reassessment? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed?
Thank you, Mayor. Back to, and Gabriel or Scott, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we came up with design standards a little while back for projects in our community. And you brought up design standards again. Are there going to be new design standards for this R340? Or are we going to use our previous standards?
There's not going to be a new set of design standards specific to the new zone as a separate project also covered by this available REAP funding. Our team, Cameron, is going to be looking at your existing objective design standards and looking for opportunities where they could be clarified, streamlined, and because it's design standards for multifamily development, it will include this new zone, but it won't be specific to just this zone, and it will be based off of the standards that you did recently develop.
And this will be all approval from the state instead of the city?
What was the question?
No.
These design standards have to be, don't have to be
No,
approved by the
design
state?
standards are city approved, not state approved.
Okay.
And if you recall, when we brought those in, they're about 3 years old, 3.5 years old.
Yes.
We said, we're going to let them run for a while, come back and take a look and see how well we're doing. There are pieces that we would have to bring back and adjust. Anyway, this is a great chance for us to update those standards and fold this all into one
Okay.
piece.
All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Scott?
Thank you, Mayor. I needed a few more minutes to think and listen, and I did have
Well,
another
that's why we hit you
question.
first, so we came back for you. So.
This is going to sound like I'm being silly and dramatic, but this is a serious question. After sitting and listening, given that you've told us owners do not have to develop, given that you've told us that developers have to mitigate their full impact, as several council members have observed, high-density development is not very economically feasible in these areas of Grand Terrace. And given, as we heard from the mayor, you guys are not doing this pro bono. This costs us a lot of money every cycle. Here is the silly but actually serious question. Why don't we just rezone every single family property in Grand Terrace as R340?
Conrad?
I don't see, how to put this. From a practical standpoint, let's do it. Okay? Because then we don't have to worry about it ever again.
We
Through
cut right to
arena
the
cycles,
chase.
We've covered it. And Councilman Allen kind of briefly touched on it, okay, when you talked about having larger parcels. It does allow the opportunity to assemble parcels. So this is looking, let's dial it forward 50 years. Some of these tracts with the higher density will be assembled. Somebody's going to buy 4 or 5 houses, get themselves, I think somebody said 3 acres. I think it's probably closer to 5 by the time you get parking amenities. But assemble 5 acres, build something that's viable on there. That's not going to happen this year. It's probably not going to happen in 10 or 15 years, but maybe 20 years. And we want to be able to control where that happens, to make sure that happens along streets and corridors that have the ability to manage that, in areas where we can scale up our utilities. If we need to increase sewer lines, we want to increase them close to the edge of the city where it's going to the plant, not on the other side. So the flip side of that answer versus, yeah, let's do it, is we would probably, by shotgunning this, create too many pieces where we don't have a coherent, planned area where this happens. And then we'll end up devaluing the city by having apartments mixed in with single-family homes, mixed in with, and the property values in the field of the city would dramatically change. So there is a reason to kind of keep this in one area rather than just shotgunning the whole city. So there's yeah, sure, let's do it. There's no reason we can't, but there is probably a functional reason on why we want to keep this in specific areas.
But what I'm hearing on the one hand is in the city, with it developed as it is, with it being largely built out, this is all hypothetical and not practically feasible anyway. So I'm not convinced the character of the whole city is going to change if it's not practical to do these developments here. However, I did hear what you said about access to utilities. that seems to be handled by developers having to mitigate their full impact. Should there be a bigger sewer or a wider street needed?
It's an interesting philosophical argument.
I'm not meaning to be philosophical or silly. I am straight up serious.
No, and
If
I'm-
it's good on those lots, why is it not good on the other lots? And I'm going to let it go at that.
Are we answering the question, or are we gonna?
He says he's going to let it go at that, but okay. I was assuming that was a rhetorical question. But, like I said, there's a philosophical argument on both sides. Sure, it's great for the whole city, smeared across everywhere, and we've hit our numbers, we're at capacity. Let the market decide what gets built where. From a more functional, controlled growth, more cohesive piece, we do want to be a little bit careful about what we're mixing. Do we really want to put apartments in Honey Hills? It becomes that kind of question, and I don't know the answer.
Will that be something to look into? I mean, that'd be the planning commission, will they be bringing?
Like I said, this is a philosophical question that planners and urban planners argue about, you know, in master's and PhD programs, but.
Well, I can see the benefit of having high density by the freeway without having a lot of traffic flow through the city.
Yeah, I can add this discussion. I'm intrigued by the idea. I'm Scott Hutter, Planning and Development Services Director, for the record. Bigger picture, we're coming up against the end of this cycle and the next housing cycle. We're also at least 6 years overdue from doing our comprehensive general plan update. As soon as we finish this housing exercise and get it certified, myself and Assistant Planner Arguelles, we're going to have to get right on it and get the general plan update going for the community, which is usually, you know, a 2 or 3 year process. And I think we should put a pin in that idea that Scott had from the Planning Commission. And when we look at the holistic general plan land use map, landscape, and zoning map, I think that's a very good discussion we should have multiple workshops on and flesh out. Because right now, as it stands, the single-family land use has been completely upended by recent state housing legislation. I know we just went through Planning Commission in December with the small lot subdivision ordinance, which we're going to be bringing to Planning City Council here next month. There's urban lot splits that went in a few years ago. There's the ADUs, which have become essentially triplex laws. There's so much going on. I think as soon as we can get on the overall general plan update, we can really tackle these holistically. And I think we got to look big picture and start thinking along those lines. So I think that's a good point, Scott.
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Yeah.
I'll throw my 2 cents in again, off the top of my head.
How much is it gonna cost for your 2 cents?
For you, I won't do it for, I'll do it for free. So what happens when you rezone property is the existing structure becomes legal nonconforming if it is not consistent with the new zoning, right? So let's play that out. If you have an R1 property and you want to tear it down and rebuild that property, that structure in 10 years, 15 years, right? And if it's still R1, you can rebuild it to a single-family home. Now let's play it out where we rezone it to R140, whatever it was. Now that single-family home is legal non-conforming. If you wanted to tear that down in 15, 20 years, guess what? You can't rebuild that single-family home. You now have to comply with the new zoning regulations. And so if that's R1, whatever it is, HCD, and I've had discussions with them, my team has had discussions, they'll say, no, you have to ensure compliance with your new zoning. You can't go backwards. Now, they would even take the position you can't even expand your home because it's legal non-conforming once it changes to the new zoning. So if we want to maintain R1 housing, I would recommend against that. Again, that's off the top of my head. I'll go over it with staff in the future. But that would be my main concern, is you'd lose the ability to rebuild R1 homes.
So to follow up on that.
Sure.
Just that same train of thought, does that mean that for the properties affected by this proposed rezoning, they're losing future use of their property should they choose to rebuild on their own site?
No, because there's a way around this. And instead of having, and I believe we said this is proposed to be done with these properties as well, that the zoning is 1-2-40. So you can have 1 unit or you can have 40 units, which would keep it into the legal conforming piece. What happens lots of times, if you really want to push density, is you'll say it must be 5 to 40, so you cannot build any less than 5 on the property. But these are designated as 1 to 40, so you can build between 1 and 40 anywhere in there. If you build less than 40, then we have to make up for it with our extra zoning. But the property owner can still build at 1 in that scenario.
And wouldn't that apply to your scenario also?
So that would, if that's going to be how it's listed.
Thank you.
And I want to hear from the consultant.
The state requires that if you're rezoning to meet your lower income RHNA, which you are, that the zone that's being created needs to have a minimum density of at least 20 units per acre. So the proposed R340 zone has a minimum density of 20, so it's 20 to 40. But if there was interest in rezoning other properties outside of this rezoning, that's where you could potentially have a higher maximum density, have that 40, and you could have a minimum density of 0 or 1 or whatever you wanted it to be. But in this case, with this zone, it's 20 to 40.
All right.
But I thought Conrad just told us that's not the case.
I think I was just corrected.
Yeah. So
Sorry.
So that brings me back to my previous question. Does that not take away some of the value in the future use of the property owners affected by this rezoning?
Again, it could in two respects. One is if they look to demolish their home and rebuild it, they're going to be subject to the new zoning, whatever it is. So if it allows for 1 unit,
that's
great.
what I was thinking.
If it allows for a minimum of 20, that's where the detriment is. And then again, in theory, and I'll talk about it with staff, is whether there would be a limitation on expanding the legal nonconforming use. Because traditionally under zoning law, you cannot expand on or extend a legal nonconforming use. So that could be an issue as well.
But we're doing the 1 to 40, right?
That's not what I'm being told.
Okay.
20 to 40 is the proposed zone. That's per state requirements. It has to be a minimum of 20.
Now, if there's a parcel in the middle of one of those yellow fields that has a single-family home on it, and that home gets damaged for whatever reason, a fire, say, for example, and has to be demolished, is that homeowner required to go, can that homeowner put a single-family home back on there, or are they going to be forced to give up their property now because they can't afford to build a 20-unit apartment complex in the middle of a single-family neighborhood?
Our rules by legal non-conforming is you may replace. So if your house burns down, you can replace with the same size house. Your house is damaged, you can fix it.
Because it wasn't their choice.
It wasn't your choice. What you can't do is tear down your house and build a new house on the site.
Ed?
So, Scott, this is going to come back to us. You possibly believe the rezoning when we work on the general?
The rezoning for this housing element will be back to you, I believe, in March at the Planning Commission and Council in April.
That's for this project?
For this project here, and then as soon as we can wrap this up and get certified, we need to start the very large lift, which is like a 2 or 3 year project to update the city's Bible, the general plan, all the elements. And that'll be coming back to the whole community for probably a dozen or 2 dozen workshops, community outreach. It's a very big undertaking.
Okay. Well, my understanding, what we're looking at today is R3, not R1, R3-40. So we're not dealing with R1-40, where Conrad and the attorney's talking about would apply, they could rebuild your home. We're dealing now, if you do, the minimum you would be able to do here is 3 homes. No?
Yeah, right now, the minimum is 20 per the state, and the
Yes.
cap is 40. And again, these numbers have no density bonuses or any multipliers built into them. Theoretically, there's always a chance to go higher with affordable projects and density bonuses, which is a separate set of legislation and housing law. But for this exercise, the minimum's 20 units to the acre, maximum's 40. And I know Conrad mentioned that there was an idea of a workaround, but it doesn't sound like that's a possibility because of the way the state law was written, from what I understood from our consultant team. We wouldn't be able to do the 1 to 40. That wouldn't be consistent with state housing law, unfortunately, it sounds like.
So once this one's resolved, this issue that we're here today for, then you and Gabriel want to start working to get going with the general plan. Can this be reopened again for zoning under the general plan update?
100% yes. The new general plan, when we start that, is going to include the next housing element cycle. So this same exercise will start anew in probably a little over a year.
So then again, we could look at Commissioner Scott's review of 1 to 40 to be one of the zones.
Well, yeah, we can have a fresh look at everything, and in fact, it's demanded of the community to take a look at the entire land use map, all the properties, commercial, residential, open space, everything. We can.
All right. Mr. Attorney, so if this goes today, and then it comes to the Planning Commission in March for recommendations to the City Council, we can look at this again and move it to a 1 to 40, and anybody that wanted to rebuild their home on their property and just their home, they would be allowed to do it under the R140.
Well, okay, a couple of things. Number one is we've already done the housing element, right?
Yes.
And the zoning is being adopted to implement the housing element. The housing element has been approved by HCD. So and I'll defer to the consultant, but I don't think we can really deviate at this point from what has been presented in the housing element without having to go backwards. Now, in the next cycle, we can certainly explore what changes can be made, but I would guess that HCD is going to pretty much clamp down on our changes, is my expectation, but I'd leave it to the consultant to kind of give feedback.
I wasn't trying to change today's thing to a 1 to 40. I understand we're going to make a decision as is on the 340, and then reevaluate this again when the general plan is being looked at. Is the state going to get involved if we reevaluate ourselves to an R140 in the new general plan?
So
Go ahead, ma'am.
we discussed the potential net loss if a project was to come in on one of our proposed properties that was less than the units that we projected or a different income. Another way that you could end up with a net loss is if you decrease the density potential on a parcel. So since we're rezoning these parcels now to 20 to 40, you would potentially be in a situation with a net loss if you were to decrease that minimum density from 20 to 1. But what Commissioner Mattis was saying earlier, if there was interest in having a density that was 0 to 40 or 1 to 40 or any maximum density that is higher than what you currently have in your single-family neighborhoods, that is something that you could look at during your general plan process, where if you wanted, you would be fully able to maintain that 0 or 1 unit per acre minimum and increase the maximum, and that would be separate from the housing element process, and so it would not need to be reviewed by the state.
So much for voting in 78 to be self-governing for Grand Terrace.
Mr. Mayor, and
Thank
the
you,
other,
City Attorney?
the other thing I would note is if you do it as an R1 to 40, you're now losing some control over how the city looks. I mean, in terms of where more high-density projects are going to be located. So right now, generally, historically, cities have land use authority. Where do we want to put single-family housing? Where do we want commercial? Where you kind of lose that aspect a little bit because now it can be 1 to 40 anywhere.
Well, I see that, But right now, face it, in Southern California right now, single-family homes are not single-family homes. Even Grand Terrace is affected. There's sometimes 2 or 3 families living in that single-family home. And they need to be able to add rooms or whatever to accommodate. They're converting their garages. Some are being done illegally, some are being correctly done. And here we are trying to tell people, sorry, you can't add to your home unless you want to put in 20 units. Or if they have a quarter acre, you have to put in 4 units. So why are we being dictated by the state and property owners having the right? I bought my property so I could put in my barn, so I could put in my land the way I want to use this land. And now I'm being told if something happens to my property, I'm going to have to build close to 55 units on my property. And I'm just kind of going over that. And that's why trying to find a way where the property owners have some control of their property in case something unfortunate happens. You know, they could become disabled in their home, and they're going to have to add a wing so this person can be wheeled around in a wheelchair, and they're going to be told, no, you can't, because you're not conforming. So, I mean, this is the issue. How do we address this so our property owners have an option to do what they want with their property? Hey, whoever buys my property after I'm dead and gone, they want to put in 55 units. I feel sorry for my neighbors. It's kind of like, I don't know how many people like going to Newport Dunes to camp. I don't. I mean, you set up a nice campfire, you sit there with your cocktail, and you look up and you're staring at 3 skyscrapers with people working in their places. That ain't camping to me, and that's what's turning into Grand Terrace. I'm going to have a single house sitting here, people having a barbecue in their backyard, and they're surrounded by apartment buildings 5 stories high. So don't mean to be ranting. I'm guessing from our consultants, there's not pretty much a way to get away from the state on this issue. So we do have our individual rights for our property, unless we leave it as is and don't touch it, other than maintenance, roofs, and so on and so forth. Is that where we stand?
I would say that's the trend. The state is taking more control over these issues. So there may be some opportunities, and we were just talking, there may be some opportunities. We hear your concern.
And I'm not
Disagreeing with
I'm not-
it. Yeah, so
I'm
we're
not
gonna
pointing
look and
barrels at
see
you.
if there's any opportunities to preserve that ability.
Because it'd be nice to know when we do start working on the general plan, what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. I don't want to put the state the city in a position where the state's coming down and fining us, especially fine us for money that we don't have, and where they won't even support our city because we're insignificant as far as they're concerned by community size. So thank you for your presentation. I'm not trying to say that you guys are the bad people here. You're just trying to present us an option with what the state has brought down upon us. So I appreciate that. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All righty, anything else, Conrad, you have for this special meeting?
No, this is, if we are satisfied at this point, we will go forward with what's that? Oh, sorry, public comments, are you looking for? We do need public comment.
Do we have any public comments?
Bobby Forbes?
Thank you. First, I'd like to say I could barely hear anything that the presenters were talking about tonight. The only people that we could hear was council. So you need to do better, thank you. Or I asked AJ if he could turn it up and he couldn't. So I have to sit up here and unable to hear probably 70% of what you said. We know we don't like this being planned or controlled by the state. I've been here for 38 years selling real estate in Grand Terrace. I remember when Barton Road zoning was changed, and all the people that had lived here since the 50s had to sell their houses to get commercial development. Kathy Harmon had most of that property for sale. She tried to get Walmart in here. They went down the hill. It took a long time to get development to come into Grand Terrace. It's a bedroom community. We need that sales tax from Barton Road, but it sure is hodgepodge. And with this presentation, that's what I see coming to Grand Terrace, should it ever happen. And I'm Ed's neighbor. I don't want him building 55 houses over there either. You know, I'm going to leave Grand Terrace eventually because I don't want to be here for the new in Grand Terrace. I don't know when that will be. And I understand that the state controls it, and we just don't really have much power here. And I appreciate very much that you are all saying, we don't like it, because we don't like it. I tried to get people here. Cindy tried to get people here tonight. There's 7 people in the audience that don't have to do with the staff or this program or this presentation. We will try to get more people to come in February to see this, to listen to this. These are people's homes. I sell these homes. I'm supposed to go look at one of them at 5 o'clock today that falls into this category about selling it because the mama passed. And now it's maybe time to sell that home. It's not okay. I remember eminent domain was brought up 20 years ago by council, and they did not want to do eminent domain. The Lewis development is not included in this, if I'm correct. I didn't see that on the map. It's all green on that map. I've not been coming to meetings lately because I've been ill, so you've missed my comments, and I've missed you. I'm trying to get back in the loop, but this is very bothersome to me as a realtor, to being in business in here. I don't want all these high-rises. I hate that building that they put on the corner of Barton Road and La Cadena Drive. It has blocked the view from all the people in La Cadena. They're building 5 houses on Rosedale and Lytton, and I think that might be a Grand Terrace address where the 5 houses are being built. Now I can't see Liloma Hill as soon as those houses go up. But they're going to see my house. They're going to see the warehouses that are being built. It's just changing it so much, and change is hard. I didn't grow up here. Doug and I are probably the only ones that remember what happened on Barton Road with all the old houses there, the roundhouse, the horses, and the piano, all that kind of stuff that went on there at that time. Thank you. I'll be back.
Thank you.
No more public comment.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
I just want to make one clarification. The speaker mentioned eminent domain. I want to make clear for the record, this is a planning, housing element, zoning obligation that the city is carrying out. There is no eminent domain contemplated by anything that is being proposed.
okay. Yeah, I thought she said 20 years ago they didn't want to do eminent domain, so that's why we're not doing it now.
Correct. But I just
You're
want to
just
notify the record.
clarifying it.
Yes.
Okay, so people don't, yeah, I understand. And so we have anything else? No other public comment? Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for your input. It's a hard subject, especially when the state is taking away local control from everything. I only got one thing to tell you on that. Research who you vote for in the state. That's all I got to say, because it does trickle downhill, and we're downhill. So you got to do your homework. We're paying good money for this. We could use this money for something else, but the experts are here, so we don't get fined. We can't afford to lose any money. We want people to move to Grand Terrace because this is still a bedroom community. I mean, if we had it our way, we would design everything different and then tell people no, but we also have to abide by the state so we don't get fined and lose other money. So I appreciate everything, and like I said, we are not alone in this state as far as cities dealing with this. This housing element is a pain for everybody. It's costing cities a lot of money for nothing. People don't want it. I think the only one big city can afford, and that's over by the ocean, and they're fighting everything tooth and nail. Unfortunately, we don't have that. But thank you, staff, for being here, and thank you, Planning Commission, for your input. A lot of good ideas. You know, we should do this more often, maybe. You guys could come to our committee all the time and just sit out here in the audience. But I appreciate everybody's comments, everybody's concerns. We love our city, and we want to see our city grow. We don't want to see it, being taken over by bureaucrats, but we have to do what's right for the city to make sure that we don't lose additional funds. So it's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow. So our next regular city council meeting will be held February 10th, 2026 at 6 p.m. Any requested item have a place on the future agenda must be made in writing and submit to the city clerk. So God bless and have a good night. Meeting adjourned.